Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Joe just said, my name is Duncan McNulty and I have the privilege of being the provost of the Bartitsu Amateur Forum. And I'm here today to give you a brief introduction to the new art of self-defense as proposed by E.W. Barton Wright. So I'm hoping that I will not only be able to educate you, but perhaps entertain you a little as well. Some of you may have had the great good fortune to read some of the articles that Barton wrote for Strand magazine. Well, better yet, had a chance to visit his physical development gymnasium in London. But for those of you who are unenlightened, you're probably by now asking yourself, what is Bartitsu and what possible relevance does it have to me? Well, let me answer that question by telling you just very briefly a little bit about the origin of our art. The progenitor, Edward William Barton Wright, was a British-born engineer who was sent across to Japan to work on the railways. Already a very keen pugilist, whilst he was there, he felt a fascination with the Japanese wrestling art, Jiu-Jitsu. So he learned all he could, and when he returned to Britain, brought back 2 instructors with him. Not content with that, he then invited other instructors from around Europe to bring their arts to him as well, and then combined all of these together and added the suffix Itsu onto his own surname, and so Bartitsu was born. So as a pugilist, he kept pre-Marquis of Queensberry rules fisticuffs as his basis for punching, added the French slightly disreputable Savate for his different kicks. Of course, up close, everything was dealt with by the Jiu-Jitsu he brought from Japan. And finally, he added the Swiss system of Lacan to make use of the ever-present gentleman's cane. As such, a well-trained Bartitsuist was able to fight happily at 3 ranges, at distance with the cane or other improvised weapon, at a mid-range with kickboxing, or indeed right up close with grappling. But let's be honest, we are men and women of action, not of words. So let's end with the dry history lesson, and let me demonstrate a little bit of Bartitsu as it was meant to be seen in practice. So let's start with pugilism. So say, for example, one evening I'm out enjoying a tibble at my favourite drinking establishment somewhere in the West End of London, and some ruffian takes umbrage with my comments about the current lacking political leadership of the country. I may be forced to deal with some kind of uneducated and inebriated lout. His blows are likely to be sloppy and wide, so the first one I'm able to block quite happily with the palm of my hand, which if I hit the right nerve cluster will totally numb his arm. The second blow is equally clumsy and I have plenty of time to catch that before returning the favour by taking the back of my hand across the brigand's face. And of course I can do all of this without actually having to put my drink in.
Splendid!
Of course! Unfortunately, it's not always going to be the case that I'm going to be facing some form of ill-trained or inebriated opponent. Should, for example, some rival for a young lady's attention desire to take the matter outside, I may have to deal with a more skilled and determined opponent. Now, as a trained man, he's going to want to close the distance quickly and extend with a nice straight fist in an attempt to take me out in as quick a manner as possible. As this happens, all I'm going to do is simply slip to the side, avoid the punch entirely, and at the same time return with my own blow to the side of his face. Unlikely to end the fight, admittedly, but allows me the time to take initiative and take control of the entire fight. Thank you. Now, as educated people are well aware, the human as a species is gifted with 4 limbs, and to only use 2 of them would be incredibly uneconomical. This is also known to the lower orders, who are more than happy to stick in a low blow to maim or cripple or distract with equal measure. So a simple kick coming in to the shin can be incredibly painful. Slightly higher at the knee can render me unable to fight. However, should somebody attack in such a manner, a swift raising of the foot simply allows the kick to land with the bottom of my sole rather than into my leg. I can then, of course, it's only fair to return the effort by turning slightly and using one of Savate's famous kicks, the chassé latéral or side kick, to send my opponent some distance back and hopefully give me time to follow up with my own attacks. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. and sometimes I'm going to have to be the protagonist and initiate such a challenge. So if I'm squaring off against a gentleman, I'm out of range at the moment, so I'm going to close in with another French kick, a chassé fouetti or round kick, to gain distance and put him on the defensive. Now I'm in close, I'm going to draw his attention down, possibly cripple him if I can, and then whilst he is somewhat distracted, I will finish with a chassé frontal or a front kick, this one with a slight jump, just to make sure he's incapable of finishing the fight. So by combining kicks, the Savate works well as well to bring those together. Now, of course, you're not always going to be in a situation where good, honest gentlemen square off against each other for a nice fair game of fisticuffs. Some ruffians will in fact lay their hands on you without so much as by your leave. Now, in this situation, I have to start from the disadvantage. Both my arms have been grabbed. I have to find a way of dealing with this, but luckily Bartitsu's Jiu-Jitsu application to make this relatively easy to deal with. So with a few quick movements, not only can I free myself from my opponent's grip, I can turn the tables and make them wish they'd never laid hands on me in the first place. However, it's very rarely is it that clear-cut a case. It's normally a bit of give and take until one side emerges as a victor. So for example, let's say if we were looking at stealing candy from a baby. Now, you may have guessed I'm a man who's partial to my treats. So, when I see the sweet, I'm obviously going to take it away like so. Now, not wanting to give up her prize, obviously, the child in question will grab my hand. And then, having had a small modicum of training herself, will step round grabbing my elbow and put my arm in an arm lock. Therefore, controlling my arm, but much more importantly, the sweet. Now, of course, I don't want this to happen, so I'm going to bend my arm and bring it back into an unlockable position. And also bring it towards my mouth. However, my opponent will sense this, and so twist my arm into a secondary lock and pin it behind my back. However, this is fine. I'm well aware and acquainted with this from my jiu-jitsu training. It teaches me that by rolling my shoulder, I can flip straight. I believe I have just been bested by a 7-year-old. Anyway, moving on. Let's. One of the things that separates mankind from the beasts is the use of tools. The ability to use that which is around them to swing things in your advantage. The gentleman's cane, ever present, very fashionable, with a small modicum of training, can be used to swiftly enable even the most stalwart of brigands. It's held above the head and used in a tick-tock fashion to rain down blows upon my opponent until he subdues. With a little bit of training, you're deliberately aiming for the joints or the soft tissues that will do the maximum amount of damage. Once you've mastered these basic techniques, you can start to look at some more advanced techniques that are useful if the other person has had some training or is indeed armed. So should I face off against another gentleman with a cane and decide to take a strike towards his head? Now, he blocks this successfully, but if I add in a slight twist of my wrist, I can arch that over the top and still land him a solid blow to the back of the head. Now, should his sense of self-preservation win out and he parries above his head, I'm going to move around for this one so I can actually speak to you lot. So, should his sense of self-preservation lift that above his head so I can't actually strike him in that way, I can reverse the angle of attack and strike up with a fair amount of speed and power like this. Of course, there are other options. Should I decide to use my cane with the hook foremost rather than back, I can start with that same attack to make him raise his arm. But this time I'm not so interested in that side of things. I'm going to turn you around again to confuse everybody. So if I start with an attack here, I'm actually going to step in and seize his bicep. From there, a slight attack to the back of the leg, and I can pull him off balance completely at my mercy. Thank you. Unthinkable as it might be, there may be times where for some reason you're out and you've left your cane at home. I mean, it's an oversight, but in such cases, a clear mind and a well-trained Bartitsuist is not left unarmed. There are many such things you can use to swing the favour of a fight in your direction. For example, a belt can be very quickly drawn, wrapped around the hand, and used as an effective weapon. Now, even before I've used any techniques, I already present a rather formidable target, and some ruffian may well decide that there is easier prey to be had and decide not to pursue with such a challenge. However, there are going to be cases where I'm dealing with an opponent who has, no offense James, more bravery than common sense. in which situations I'm forced to be able to back up my bravado with some level of skill. So should, for example, the knife be aimed to pierce my heart and end my life with a simple stab, by seizing the belt in both hands, I can parry that attack without taking my hand anywhere near the sharp aspects of the blade. From there, it's a simple case of following the momentum forward, looping the belt around his neck, his chin, and stepping through to garrote the poor unfortunate well. Now, all of these independently are useful little tricks and interesting asides, but the true strength in Bartitsu comes from combining these elements together. So, let's take another example. Should say, for example, I've been out for the evening and I'm on my way home, perhaps after a pleasant evening at the Gentlemen's Club of the Empire, or perhaps escorting a young lady to the latest theatrical extravaganza in the West End. Now, on my way back, I unfortunately faced some ruffian who, seeing my fine attire, decides that I may be an easy mark and is demanding my coinage in exchange for not running me through. Now, with a reasonable amount of training, I can overcome such an opponent as lightly armed as I am, but it involves me taking the initiative in the matter. The first part is that I will take my coat and launch it at my opponent's face, if the wind isn't in the right direction. Going well so far. This is mostly a distraction, so that by the time he has freed himself, I've readied my cane, or in this case umbrella, to deliver a stout hit across the back of the hand to disarm him, and make him step back, rubbing his sore fingers. Now, by this point, I have the range attack, but he is going to come in and pursue with a punch. I'm going to block this very easily by pushing it aside with the umbrella. Now, he's going to keep going, thinking he might get lucky with the second attack, but unfortunately will not, and leave me to hook the back of his neck and drive his face into my knee. Now, unfortunately, he has enough common sense to have covered his face, so this fight continues. So I'm going to release his neck, turn, and switch seamlessly into my Savate, and send him scooting out the way so that I have range to bring my cane back into play. Of course, he realizes that I have the advantage again, so presses in once more with a punch, which I am going to slip and aim a blow directly at his kneecap. I'm going to turn you around again for the sake of viewing. But let's say Lady Luck is not on my team tonight, and I miss his knee. I'm forced to turn and attempt to bayonet thrust towards his chest. Unfortunately, that too is not only parried, but removed entirely from my hand. So I am in a situation where I'm then forced to switch again as quickly as possible from my cane fighting back to my pugilism with a straight punch into his jaw, hopefully dislocating it. Now, unfortunately, this is a stout British fellow, he can shrug off such damage, and will no doubt push my hand out the way. This allows me to step in lower, reach across, and throw him happily backwards over my knee. From there I can turn and, well, choose which part of him I wish to make part of the pavement. Or at least convince him that staying down whilst I walk away is his best option. Thank you. So hopefully, in this short demonstration, I've been able to show you there are some practical aspects to this new art of self-defense. And I would encourage you, if you have any questions about Bartitsu, please feel free to come and talk to me, and please enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.